Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today.
I'm Connie Willis, and you're listening to Coast AM. Tonight I'm talking with David Weatherly, the author of Black-Eyed Children, Strange Intruders, and he's been doing this for over 35 years. And I guess you started when you were 2. Is that correct? Is that what we want to go with there, David? Let me. There's so many different things I can ask you. Let's go back to Strange Intruders before we move on to outside of your book. I know you've done a lot of work on the jinn. You know, a lot of people talk about the jinn, and I've heard people say, oh, they're good. I've heard people say, not at all. So tell me what you know and what you've learned about the jinn.
Yeah, that's that's a pretty significant topic, I think, right now, especially when we get into the realms of paranormal, because, you know, the jinn are, first of all, for people who don't know what they are, commonly in the West, we refer to them as genies, and that in itself is sort of a can of worms because, you know, when you say genie to someone, it usually conjures a couple of images that are sort of laughable. You know, Barbara Eden if you're older generation, or, you know, Disney's cartoon. But essentially, you know, it conjures this image of something that's kind of goofy that there's even a series of commercials on now, you know, with these genies that are sort of screwing up their magic or, you know, doing silly things.
That's true, but they're usually positive when you see those, though, David. Right? They're usually positive is what we see. I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, I think that the reality of these things is actually much more sinister. And, you know, they actually go very far back in history. They're very tied into the Islamic faith, and, you know, they're part of the creation myth that you find in the Muslim traditions. They talk about Allah creating 3 races. They created angels, humans, and jinn. And in the text, it says that the jinn were created from smokeless flame. So you sort of get this image of, some people identify that as like a plasma, or, you know, like a just a pure fire, sometimes a black fire. And what people need to understand about these entities is that we get into the realms of belief and how that affects the reality of people's experiences with these entities. And what I mean by that is that, according to the Islamic faith, if you're a good Muslim, you believe in the jinn. So you have to stop and think about that, and think about how many Muslims there are in the world. And, you know, that's not to say anything negative or positive necessarily about Muslims. I'm just saying that as part of their core beliefs, they believe whatever is written in the Quran. And it's written in the Quran that Allah created the jinn. They are, therefore, a reality on some level. Now, when you get into the whole world of exploring exactly what that means, there are a lot of different interpretations of it. And some people in Middle Eastern countries believe that these entities are just some type of pure energy. Some people believe that they live essentially in another realm. But really, you get into the mythology of it, and you get the sense that these were beings that were here and were exiled. And that's what it essentially says in the Islamic text, that, you know, the jinn refused to bow down to the superiority of man, and therefore they were cast out. And when you go to a lot of the countries that have a strong, you know, core of Islam, then you find that people will talk about the jinn in different terms, but essentially in that they are always there. You know, they can live in abandoned buildings, or they can live in the wind. A lot of places around the Middle East, even famous places like Petra, are purportedly haunted by jinn. You know, it's the abode of jinn. some areas they won't even say the word jinn, because the concept is that just by speaking about them, you invoke their presence and you call attention upon yourself. So, it's a pretty intense topic. The more you get into it, the more fascinating it is, at least to me. But I think it's really relevant now because we're at a period in history where we've had Western soldiers in Middle Eastern countries since, the 90s at this point. And you have all these Westerners going to these countries, experiencing these things that are an intricate part of the culture there, and sometimes they're bringing things back with them. I've spoken to a lot of soldiers who spent time in the Middle East who came back and started experiencing a wide range of paranormal phenomena. Hearing spirit voices and not using any kind of device or anything, just hearing voices speaking to them. Sometimes, their deceased father or mother or grandmother or whatever, and poltergeist-like activity in their homes, illnesses in the family, wide range of strange things that often ends up being strangely connected to, quote, souvenirs they brought back from the Middle East.
The voice you are hearing right now is David Weatherly, and this is Coast to Coast AM. I'm Connie Willis. We're discussing from his book, Strange Intruders, one of the intruders being jinns. When you speak of jinns, David, you kind of sound like they're demons, fallen angels, demonics. That's kind of what you're describing. Is that the same thing?
Some people draw that correlation. I think that, you roughly can, but it's really hard to do. You're trying to interpret something through, essentially a Christian lens from a culture that's not Christian. And that makes it very difficult to completely transfer over. There are a lot of similarities in the creation story, but there are also some differences. And
what are those?
The jinn, it's pretty complex, the idea of these beings when you get into it, because there's a belief that they have a whole hierarchy, that they are that there are different classes of jinn and different levels, and some of them are not malevolent at all. But those are the ones who pretty much aren't interested in interfering with mankind, And then you get others that are really devoted to the idea of doing anything they can do to damage humanity. And that's, out of a sense of revenge, because they essentially were cast out. They refused to bow down to mankind, so they were cast out, and now they're angry about it. So you get into, all this lore about the jinn and how they'll lure people in, and the whole concept of, you get 3 wishes, but be careful how you phrase them and exactly what you ask for, because the jinn are sort of tricksters in that sense. But the more stories I've heard of people encountering what they identify as these beings, the more sinister they sound to me over time.
Yeah, they don't sound good whatsoever, and they don't have, from what you're describing as well, it's almost like an energy, isn't it? Doesn't. I've heard some people say they always have a tail. They always have a tail. You'll know them because they always have a tail. But you're describing that maybe there just is more of an energy, plasma. What do these things look like? Are they shapeshifters as well?
That's they have a wide range of powers attributed to them, and one of the things that they purportedly can do is shapeshift and take virtually any form. Now, there are some people out there who are researching the jinn who sort of want to use them as the answer for everything and say, okay, well, the Sasquatch can be explained as the jinn, gray aliens, a long list of things. And I don't think that the paranormal in general has one specific answer or one specific entity that's behind it, but I do think that the jinn are a very big component of a lot of the things that people have been experiencing, particularly in the last 10 to 20 years. Now, there are a lot of correlations between the jinn and shadow people. Some real similarities between those two things, and it's very possible that a lot of these incidents of people experiencing these shadow beings very well could be jinn in that form. They essentially will take whatever form they need that allows them to best terrorize someone.
I know you know a lot about this Slender Man, and you were talking about before to me that people can create a creature, and it can sometimes come into fruition. And is that what you were talking about with the Slender Man?
Yeah, George and I touched on this briefly. This is a whole show alone. The term is a tulpa.
That's it.
And that comes from ancient Tibet. The idea is that by focusing enough energy, and the ancient Tibetans had a very specific set of rituals that they would go through, and essentially focus enough energy into a being that is first imagined in the consciousness and begins to take on material form. There's some pretty fascinating stories from early on. There was a woman named Alexandra David Nail who went to Tibet when it was the Forbidden Kingdom, and she has some wild experiences there and ended up writing about them much later on. And she went through this whole process and essentially created a tulpa. And the tulpa she created, she wanted something outside the framework of the culture that she was in the midst of. Bear in mind, she's traveling in Tibet, and she creates a tulpa that looks like Friar Tuck. And, it's this sort of short, jolly monk. This figure took on full physical form and began to follow her caravan as they left the village. And it took on a very sinister air. The reason it did that, she later learned, was that these tulpas, once they gain enough energy, can essentially take on a life of their own.
Tulpa, what is that? Tulpa?
And that's correct. Yeah, Tulpa, tulpa.
And it's basically like we were talking about before with the Montauk chair, with the Montauk Project, where you would think of something and it would create, it would manifest. Am I right?
Essentially, I wasn't able to hear the first part of your program tonight, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. But yeah, in the West, you often hear the term thought form, which is a rough equivalent. Thought forms generally are not fully materialized in the physical, however. When we get around to the Slender Man, it's very curious and kind of disturbing. I've been lecturing about tulpas for a few years, and a couple of years ago I was sort of warning people in lectures and saying, we need to look at this whole, quote, concept of the Slender Man that has become this internet meme, because, I warned at the time that we may be seeing the creation of a tulpa through the collective consciousness. And the Slender Man, for people who aren't really familiar with the background of this thing, it was a figure created in a contest on an internet forum. And the idea was they wanted to create a paranormal-themed image of, a creature that they could make go viral on the net so that people believed it was real. Oh. And initially, the last I checked, the forum was still up. It's called Something Awful, and it's a massive thread about this thing. Initially, people were throwing all these different, photoshopped images of different cryptids and aliens and all this kind of thing. And then this guy started doing these postings, and they were very subtle. Again, sometimes the creepy factor really comes in when it's more subdued and more subtle. And he essentially created a new version of the boogeyman. It was this tall, dark figure without a face that lurked in the background, was notorious for being around disasters and making people disappear. And he went through a couple different names. Eventually he became called the Slender Man, one word. And, we've seen some pretty disturbing developments with this thing over the last several years, because people started reporting that they were having encounters with this thing. Now, that's another rabbit hole to go down. Are we creating a tulpa through collective consciousness? Or is it some type of entity like a jinn or something else
Or are they jumping on the bandwagon?
Exactly.
Or are they jumping, right? Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Is it a jinn or some type of spirit or something utilizing that form and sort of riding on that energy that all these people are projecting into that? Either one's a possibility. So either way, we get to a point where people are reporting encounters with this creature that they identify as the Slender Man.
If we're creating that stuff, wow. Manifestation. I mean, people, they come on and they have infomercials of, hey, manifest this car that you want, the home that you want, this that you want, and now manifest something evil, dark, that can lurk around and cause havoc like that. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, essentially. And, the Internet is a new factor in all of this stuff because we really have a different level of experiencing the collective consciousness now. People can communicate instantly from around the world and throw these ideas out there, and thousands of other people in no time can sort of jump on the bandwagon and co-create.
Yeah, and I mean, how many out of the percentage of stories, how many you think the people really believe what they say, and the other percentage is just, hey, I want to just have some fun and throw another story on the
I'm sure
on the
there's
grid
quite
here.
a bit of that, yeah. But it's hard to say. I mean, this guy who created this on the forum, he was very, he was. You got to give him credit for his creativity and tapping into that, consciousness, that idea of the boogeyman. And he sort of pulled on some old folklore ideas. There are a few figures in European history that are similar to and resemble Slender Man stories, but nothing exactly like it.
David, I got to ask you, what is this haunted island that you were on?
I assume the one in Italy, right?
I can't say it. Pavaliga.
It's called Pavalia.
Pavalia. Okay. A silent
That is
G.
an island in the Venetian Lagoon, and it is. Oh gosh, it has a very long history. It was first mentioned in the year like 420 or something, and it has been used by monks. It was used purportedly for plague victims at one point. It is very difficult to get to. At the time, it was a really weird story because I went with one other person, and we were trying to get to this island, and everyone kept telling us, no, it's impossible. You can't go there. And right up until the last minute, I was contacting everybody I could think of, and then at the last minute, suddenly we had offers to say, okay, well, we'll take you over there. You have to hire a boat, essentially, to take you out there. And these people, of course, I've experienced this a lot. They looked at me like I was nuts. You want us to drop you off on Pavalia and
really? Really?
It's all Italian, which I only speak a smattering of, and it was an interesting experience. But there is a massive structure there that was used as a hospital, and it was closed in the 1960s, and since that time, of course, there are a lot of weird stories that have come out of the place, that there are spirits there and voices, and it's a really surreal experience because there's a lot of the building is, of course, is falling apart in places, and you see nature taking this place back. And I literally walked into one room, this massive rectangular shaped room, and there was no ceiling anymore. There were just roots and branches from the trees that had grown in and taken over the ceiling and created a new natural ceiling. But it's very surreal. There are hospital beds still in there, and lots of other debris and so forth. And it's one of those places that you feel a presence the whole time you're there within this place. And lots of EVPs and things like that from the long history of the place. And ironically, right after I was there, within days, there was an announcement that came out that said the island had been sold to a private interest who wants to do what else but put a resort there.
Oh,
so,
my.
Let's pick an incredibly haunted island, tear down what's there and build a luxury resort. So I have no idea what the status of that is. I know that at one point there was a coalition of people in Italy trying to buy it themselves and preserve it for history. But apparently that fell through, and this private interest has taken the place. But again, a fascinating journey and an incredibly haunted place. There are reports of apparitions and a wide range of other things. I didn't see any apparition when I was there, but heard a lot of anomalous sounds and voices, and had some pretty strange experiences in the buildings.
You go to these places, and whether you hear stories from someone else or you experience them yourself, what are these entities doing just hanging out in just one area, and they're constantly staying there, throughout the decades and the years that people talk about these things? What is it about entities? I mean, just your opinion, your thought. You go to a room and everybody says, "Oh, watch the room on the third floor. There's always something there." Why would something just stay in one room? Wouldn't you just want to go check out the universe? What's that about? I mean, really.
Well, there are a variety of answers for that. Again, there's not any one defined answer to explain all of that phenomena. Sometimes what we're dealing with is residual energy, and essentially it is, for lack of a better term, it's a recording. If there was a traumatic event or something that was, very emotionally or energetically charged, then it creates an impression on the area. There are a lot of theories that get into this. There's the limestone theory and the quartz energy theory, and these are all ideas that high levels of emotional energy can create a recording, just like we would record music on a CD. The impressions of an event can somehow be recorded on the organic material of a location, and certain things trigger that to replay. So, this is kind of convincing in some areas where you go, particularly in Europe, where you'll find locations of, an old castle where a particular, event, say a murder took place, and people report that every year on the anniversary of that murder, they see this apparition or they hear these sounds, and it seems to be repeating itself. And that would suggest some type of almost like a time loop where this recording is replaying itself. But then you get into other situations where areas just sort of become magnetic to various kinds of energies, and they seem to be a collecting point for various spirits. That's by a lot of spiritual traditions, the idea is that these people haven't, they've passed away, but they haven't, quote, crossed over, into whatever the beyond is. So they're sort of stuck. You can identify that as purgatory or, the world between or whatever you're comfortable dealing with. But it's the concept that the spiritual essence of a person hasn't completed its journey, therefore it's just out of reach, and it's on occasion able to contact or interact with the physical world.
Do you think possibly that a portal could be created where someone passes away because it is where they have passed and moved forward? Do you think that is now a portal? And I don't know. I don't even know what I'm asking, but do you get where I'm going with that? I'm not even sure.
Maybe I do. I mean, you're sort of
it kind of creates a portal,
something on a personal level in regards to an individual. My concept of portal areas
is big.
Keel referred to them as window areas, and I'm absolutely convinced that there are portal areas around the world, and I consider those areas where there's a high concentration of strange manifestations, just a wide range of stuff from UFO sightings to, entity encounters, cryptids, hauntings. It's just a wide variety of things. And
Skinwalker Ranch and all that.
Ranch is probably one of the best known areas in the United States. That region, and it's not just the ranch itself. I'd emphasize. I've done a lot of research in that area, and it's the whole what's called the Uinta Basin, where that ranch is located, and the range of stories from that place is just phenomenal. I mean, cryptid encounters, from Sasquatch to dogmen to, a wide range of other things. There are haunted sites. There are encounters with little people, that people commonly associate with just, the Celtic lands, Ireland and so forth. No, there are a lot of little people sightings in the United States, and there are certainly some of those from the Uinta Basin. So these portal areas seem to be regions that, for whatever reason we don't quite understand yet, they've become a focal point of this strange activity. Now, native cultures talk about these areas, and a lot of times you'll find portal regions that the native people refer to as a taboo area. They won't go there. And they'll have a wide range of reasons for that, but they acknowledge that there are strange things that happen in this area of the country, so it's best to stay out of it as far as they're concerned. Superstition Mountains is in Arizona.
Tell me about Superstition Mountain.
They're focusing on the treasure that is supposed to be in the Superstitions, and that's the famous Lost Dutchman's gold mine, which, that itself is a whole area of study. There are so many strange legends revolving around this mine that's supposed to be, just a rich vein of gold that, people have searched for years now and still do. But the superstitions themselves, there are a lot of other weird stories that come out of there. There are UFO sightings. There are encounters with reptilian beings in that area. And the natives in the area, the native lore of that area says that the superstitions are the realm of this reptilian king that lives under the mountain, and that's his land, so it's best to stay out of there. And, it's one of these places where there are cases of disappearances where literally two people will be walking on a trail together, and, one person will turn around just for a moment, and when he turns back, his partner's gone.
Whoa.
And the disappearances there are very bizarre. There are people that have vanished in that area that, no sign of them has ever been found.
Is this the place where a lot of the heads are cut off? Is that
there are a couple of those stories where they have found, bodies, or just skeletons, rather, with no skull around. And it's hard to say whether predators took that or, scattered the bones or whatnot. But and we know that some of those deaths, the treasure hunters in that region are, some of them can be very possessive and downright dangerous about their areas, what they consider their territory. And, there are people that have been treasure hunting in those hills and have been shot at by other people and so forth. So you've got the whole factor of the danger and the criminal element, too, that's involved with this. It's not a safe place to be trekking around in.
Do you think, what are your thoughts? Do you think that maybe they are the other people that have their claim and they're going in there trying to find the gold or this treasure, and instead of, and maybe they're just throwing out these stories that you'll go missing and there's weird things here and it's all mythical kind of stuff, or are they really just going to shoot you and they don't want you to get close to their gold or treasure?
Well, I think all sides of it are true. I think that there are people down there who are, going to violently oppose someone coming into their territory. And I don't mean to imply there's, 100 of these nutcases running around. We're talking about, a small group of people. Most of the people who are treasure hunting in there are, completely peaceful about it. But the lore of this region goes back even prior to the Dutchman gold mine. So I think there's much more to the area than just a few violent acts. There are accounts that I've collected from down there. I've interviewed people from the area who've had very strange encounters in the region, who spotted UFOs just driving around, when they were driving around, the superstitions. I've been in the superstitions myself, and it's a rather unsettling area. It has this different, there's something very different. I mean, the land is different, obviously. It's very unique.
How is that?
The profile of the superstitions is very unique, but there's another quality about the place that you can't quite put your finger on, and there's always this feeling of something slightly unsettling there.
When you say it's very different and unique and looking and everything, I mean, try your best to give us the best description of that you can, a good visual and feeling.
The profile of the mountains, it's that in itself is unique. This is desert terrain, so it's very rocky. It's very dry. It's it's hot almost year round, and it's if you don't know what you're doing, you're taking a big risk anyway, being out in the desert, because this is a climate that, unless you live there or spend a lot of time there, most people aren't familiar with. You have to be aware of the things in the environment that can help you, hurt you. There's rattlesnakes. There's all kinds of things that are dangerous. But beyond that, there's something else. It's almost the closest thing I can equate it to is something like the unsettling feeling you have when there's like the vibration or the hum from some kind of machine that just shakes you a little bit on some level. And it's almost that type of quality. There's something that is just you sort of feel that buzz. You sort of feel like, wow, something is really off with this place. Something is really weird with this place.
You think it's an underground base?
I don't think there's an underground military base or anything there. No, I don't. I do know that there are a lot of tunnels underneath the superstitions, and those are linked to some of the native lore that surround the region.